Military Times. How did the Army exceed its recruiting goals this year?
I don't believe it.
It was the student loan crisis, not the wars, service leaders say. So they get rid of the draft. This is genius. We get rid of the draft. Why do you get rid of the draft? Well, because if there's a draft, people will be aware of how many wars we're in, and they'll start protesting, and they'll have us end the war, and that's going to cause us. So we get rid of the draft. What we do is we implement corporatism. We make it way too expensive to go to college. We have shitty jobs everywhere. And then what else are you going to do? You got to join the military. And that's exactly what that's what this says. This was caused by a student loan crisis. We made it so expensive for people to go to school in America that they have to first go kill people in other countries in order to be able to afford to have a life. This is where Terrence McKenna talks about how your culture is not your friend. Because your culture, when you're 18 years old, puts you in a uniform, gives you a gun, sends you to exotic places and tells you to kill the fucking people there. Your culture is not your friend. This guy says, in case anyone is wondering why they don't want us to cancel student debt and have free college. That's why they don't want to cancel student debt, and that's why they don't want to have free college. Where else are we going to get our soldiers, baby? You got to have desperate people everywhere. You want to go to college? You want to have a life? You can't afford it, right? Go to the military. We'll help you afford it. This is from the Army Times. From the Army Times. It says student loan crisis, not Mideast wars, helped Army leaders exceed recruiting goals this year. One of the national crises right now is student loans. So $31,000 is about the average, Musk said. You can get out of the Army after 4 years, 100% paid for state college anywhere in the United States. Hey, why don't we just offer people 100% paid college anywhere in the United States? Why don't we just offer people that? If that's a good thing to have, people going to college, that's good for our country and our culture and our community. Why don't we just send people to college? Why do we have to first have them go kill people in other countries before they can go to college? Why do we do that? Because our government has been captured by the military-industrial complex that Elizabeth Warren fucking votes for. That's why. A significant part of the recruiting push has been showing that the Army serves as a pathway to America's middle class.
That is slowly destroyed because they don't have health care, and then they have to care for their soldier who returns wounded.
Right.
And you can see many stories that are tragic about the lack of care for our troops.
Mm-hmm.
Veterans.
Army serves as a pathway to the America's middle class. Not college, not some other not a jobs program that the government is instituting, not a job, nothing. No, what does? Military. Killing people. By the way, the most inefficient way to spend a dollar as far as creating economic activity is military spending. So a significant part of the recruiting push has been showing that the Army serves as a pathway to America's middle class, with several service leaders noting that their own children, use the GI Bill benefits and ROTC scholarships. Yeah, if there's something like a world war and you have to enlist to go fight back fascism and the Nazis, then yeah, you try to take care of those people afterwards. You go, hey, guess what? For your service, we're going to... You don't try to create this problem over and over. You don't act like we're in a world war. We're not in a world war anymore. You don't have to fucking go do that. Guess what? You're a citizen. We'll send you to college. How's that? Why? Because we can. We can afford it. No problem. I have 3 kids serving. A lot of us have kids serving, Army Chief of Staff General James McConville said. And the reason is because we see it as a pathway to success. Well, tell me that when your kid comes back from Iraq after being blown up by an IUD. I guess when none of your kids got killed in Afghanistan? That kind of path to success? You fucking moron.
I was curious. I don't remember. Maybe you two gentlemen do. Did Chelsea Clinton join the military?
Chelsea Clinton, how could she ever be successful? She didn't join the military. What was her path to success? She didn't join the military.
How about the Bush daughters?
The Bush daughters also didn't join the military. What was their path to success?
Their fathers were the executive in chief. Why wouldn't they want to follow in his footsteps?
He was the commander in chief of the military.
Yeah, why wouldn't they?
You would think that their dad's running the military. Why wouldn't they join? It's a pathway to success. According to Army Chief of Staff General James McConville, who may be the biggest fucking moron in this story. What a moron. No wonder you're in the Army. You think like that. You're a moron. Oh, I want all my kids to have a chance to get blown up for oil. You know, your whole job is based on fucking killing people for their natural resources. That's the whole deal. That's why we have 1,000 bases around the world. We have an empire.
You got 22 kids killing themselves every day from PTSD.
That's right.
So every day, shooting themselves, coming back. So it's not just the deaths over there; it's the deaths at home because we can't even take care of these kids when they come home.
But that's a pathway to success. They can come home and kill themselves successfully. Is that the kind of success you're talking about? 22 suicides a day? A day. Is that the kind of success you're talking about? Army Chief of Staff General James McConville, is that the kind of fucking success you're talking about? 22 suicides a day, you fucking warmongering jackass? You send your kids to school, learn how to be a teacher or a fucking fireman or a medic. Actually help people instead of fucking blow shit up and be a tool of Raytheon. Educational benefits, trade skill credentialing, adventure, and a way out of a small town are still the big reasons young people want to enlist. Not they want to serve their country. Because they're desperate and they have no fucking opportunities. Do you even hear what the fuck you're saying? Educational benefits, trade skill credentialing, and adventure. And a way out of a small town. Those are the big reasons people join the goddamn military. Not because they think we need to go fucking kill some people in Syria or Venezuela or Iran or Iraq or Somalia or Libya. We just bombed Libya again.
You know, it just reminds me, Jimmy, of the first time that I saw the clip on YouTube by Mike Preisner when he talked about his experience being in the military and how it changed his life and how he's embarrassed about what he had to do as someone in the military.
Can you find that video?
Mike Preisner.
The low unemployment rate and booming economy make recruiting difficult. Could you imagine you're a recruiter and you're like, oh, I hope fucking people are desperate. Then I can sign them up for this job they don't really want, which involves killing people. Oh, if only the economy tanks. If only people are more This is the military bragging that people are desperate enough that we need to get desperate people. The low unemployment rate and booming economy make recruiting difficult, especially when compared to past recruiting pushes during the Iraq and Afghanistan wars that lined up closer to a major global recession. Could you believe that paragraph? So it's tougher to recruit people right now for the Army than it was before, than it was during the Iraq and Afghanistan wars that lined up closer. So if we have a global recession, it's easier to recruit people. Just so you know. Just so you know. The successful recruitment effort relied in part on the Army's top civilian and uniformed leaders flying out to 22 American cities to pitch to locals what the service could offer young people. From college financing to the soft skills that employers crave. Why don't we just have fucking job skill building programs? Why do we got to make them go in the military and kill people? Why can't we just have a system in America that offers college financing and soft skills that employers like? we moved more uniformed personnel into the marketing organization so that we could try to get control of the messaging. This is all about marketing. This is marketing. They have to market to you to get you to join your country's military. They have to market to you. They have to advertise to you. What the fuck? Shouldn't that be illegal? Shouldn't we ban military advertising? Shouldn't that be the first thing that's fucking banned? If people don't want to join your military, then you gotta then that's great. That means we're not at war. Because we're not at war, except we are at war, because they keep making people so desperate, they have to sign up for the military. And if people weren't desperate, we wouldn't have a fucking military doing this shit. The Army recently established a new Chicago-based marketing team stocked with uniformed officers to be closer to its new advertising firm, DDB Chicago, which won a $4 billion contract. $4 billion to advertise for new recruits. I wonder how much money that is per new recruit. Because they had 68,000 people sign up. So there you go.
You know, Jimmy, I just want to remind you, and I know we'll eventually cover it, but we had a clip. We were in our front yard.
I know. I have it. I didn't put it in today.
Yeah, but I just want to say what happened that day, right?
Yes.
We're on our street walking our dog, and there were actual Army recruiters talking to the three young men that were hanging out. One were detailing their car across the street, and they approached them about, how do you like school? What do you think about the military? Are you kidding me?
And so Steph walks up to the one guy and says, hey, do you know how many suicides military men commit every day? No, I don't. That's what he said. No, I don't. Fucking, yeah, 58,000 per recruit. There you go. So we could give those people, each of them, $58,000. Tell them to go to college, get a life, go buy a house. No, you got to go kill people. We're gonna give this money to an advertiser instead of giving it to our. That's your tax dollars. $4 billion going to an advertising agency to make commercials to get your brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, and your sons and daughters to sign up to go fucking make money for Raytheon. This isn't about defending a country, or this isn't even about spreading democracy. This is about protecting our corporate interests all around the globe. That's what the military is today. It's not a path to success. It's a path to teach you how to become a fucking psychopath who kills other people and steals their natural resources. That's what the fucking military has become. It's been that way my whole goddamn life, by the way. Mm-hmm. When I say become. So here's Mike Preisner. This is kind of a long. Let's play a little bit of it.
My name is Mike Preisner. I joined the Army, left for basic training on my 18th birthday in June of 2001. I was assigned to the 10th Mountain Division, and in March of 2003, I was attached to the 173rd Airborne Brigade and deployed to northern Iraq. So when I first joined the Army, we were told that racism no longer existed in the military. A legacy of inequality and discrimination was suddenly washed away by something called the Equal Opportunity Program. We would sit through mandatory classes, and every unit had this EO representative to ensure that no elements of racism could resurface. And the Army seemed firmly dedicated to smashing any hint of racism. And then September 11th happened, and I began to hear new words like towel head and camel jockey, and the most disturbing, sand nigger. And these words did not initially come from my fellow soldiers, but from my superiors, my platoon sergeant, my company first sergeant, battalion commander. All the way up the chain of command, these terms, these viciously racist terms, were suddenly acceptable. And I noticed that the most overt racism came from veterans of the first Gulf War. And those were the words they used when they were incinerating civilian convoys. Those are the words they used when this government deliberately targets civilian infrastructure, bombing water supplies, knowing that it would kill hundreds of thousands of children. Those are the words the American people used when they allowed this government to sanction Iraq. And this is something that many people forget, and we can't forget. Is that We've just learned that we've killed over 1 million Iraqis since this invasion, but we already killed 1 million Iraqis in the 90s through sanctions and bombings prior to this invasion. So the number truly is much higher. But when I got to Iraq in 2003, I learned a new word, and that word was Haji. Haji was the enemy. Haji was every Iraqi. He was not a person, a father, a teacher, or a worker. And it's important, we've heard this word a lot during Winter Soldier, but it's important to understand where this word came from. And to Muslims, the most important thing is to take a pilgrimage to Mecca. It's the Hajj. And someone who has taken this pilgrimage is a Haji. And it's something that in traditional Islam is the highest calling in the religion. So we took the best thing for a Muslim and made it into the worst thing. But history did not start with us, and since the creation of this country, racism has been used to justify expansion and oppression. The Native Americans were called savages, the Africans were called all sorts of things to excuse slavery, and Vietnam veterans know of the multitude of words used to justify that imperialist war. So Haji was the word we used. It was the word we used on this particular mission I'm going to talk about. And we've heard a lot about different raids and kicking down the doors of people's houses and ransacking their houses. But this mission was different, a different kind of raid. I never got any explanation for these orders. We were only told that this group of houses, 5 or 6 houses, were now property of the U.S. military, and we had to go in and make those families leave those houses. So we went to these houses and informed the families that those homes were no longer their homes. We provided them no alternative, nowhere to go, no compensation, and they were very confused and very scared and did not know what to do and would not leave, so we had to remove them from those houses. One family in particular, a woman with 2 small girls, a very elderly man and 2 middle-aged men, we dragged them from their houses and threw them onto the street. And arrested the men because they refused to leave, arrested the old man, and sent them off to prison. And at that time, I didn't know what happened to people when we tied their hands behind their back and put a sandbag on their head. But unfortunately, a few months later, I had to find out. We were short interrogators, so I was assigned to work as an interrogator. And I oversaw and participated in hundreds of interrogations. One in particular I'm going to share with you. It was a moment for me that really showed me the nature of this occupation. This particular detainee, when I was sent to interrogate him, he was stripped down to his underwear, hands behind his back, and a sandbag on his head. I never actually saw this man's face. My job was to take this metal folding chair and just smash it against the wall next to his head. He was faced against the wall with his nose touching the wall, while a fellow soldier screamed the same question over and over again. No matter what his answer, my job was to slam the chair against his wall. We did this until basically we got tired, and I was told to make sure he stood against the wall for however long, and I was guarding this prisoner, and my job was to make sure he kept standing up, but something was wrong with his leg. He was injured, and he kept falling to the ground. And the sergeant in charge would come and tell me to get him up off his feet, so I'd have to pick him up and put him against the wall. And he kept going down. I just have to keep pulling him up and putting him against the wall. And my sergeant came along, and he was upset with me for not, continue to stand. He picked him up and slammed him against the wall several times. And then he left, and when the man went down on the ground again, I noticed blood pouring down from under the sandbag. And so I let him sit, and when I noticed my sergeant coming again, I would tell him quickly to stand up. And then I realized that I was supposed to be guarding my unit from this detainee, and at that point I realized I was guarding the detainee from my unit. And I tried hard to be proud of my service, but all I could feel was shame. And racism could no longer mask the reality of the occupation. These were people, these were human beings. I've since been plagued by guilt anytime I see an elderly man, like the one who couldn't walk, who he rolled onto a stretcher and told the Iraqi police to take him away. I feel guilt anytime I see a mother with her children, like the one who cried hysterically and screamed that we are worse than Saddam as we forced her from her home. I feel guilt anytime I see a young girl, like the one I grabbed by the arm and dragged into the street. We were told we were fighting terrorists. The real terrorist was me, and the real terrorism is this occupation. Racism within the military has long been an important tool to justify the destruction and occupation of another country. It has long been used to justify the killing, subjugation, and torture of another people. Racism is a vital weapon employed by this government. It is a more important weapon than a rifle, a tank, a bomber, or a battleship. It is more destructive than an artillery shell, or a bunker buster, or a Tomahawk missile. While all those weapons are created and owned by this government, they are harmless without people willing to use them. Those who send us to war do not have to pull a trigger or lob a mortar round. They do not have to fight the war, they merely have to sell the war. They need a public who is willing to send their soldiers into harm's way. They need soldiers who are willing to kill and be killed without question. They can spend millions on a single bomb, but that bomb only becomes a weapon when the ranks in the military are willing to follow orders to use it. They can send every last soldier anywhere on earth, but there will only be a war if soldiers are willing to fight. And the ruling class, the billionaires who profit from human suffering, who care only about expanding their wealth, controlling the world economy, understand that their power lies only in their ability to convince us that war, oppression, and exploitation is in our interest. They understand that their wealth is dependent on their ability to convince the working class to die to control the market of another country. And convincing us to kill and die is based on their ability to make us think that we are somehow superior. Soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen have nothing to gain from this occupation. The vast majority of people living in the U.S. have nothing to gain from this occupation. In fact, not only do we have nothing to gain, but we suffer more because of it. We lose limbs, endure trauma, and give our lives. Our families have to watch flag-draped coffins lowered into the earth. Millions in this country without health care, jobs, or access to education must watch this government squander over $450 million a day on this occupation. Poor and working people in this country are sent to kill poor and working people in another country to make the rich richer. And without racism, soldiers would realize that they have more in common with the Iraqi people than they do with the billionaires who send us to war. I threw families onto the street in Iraq, only to come home and find families thrown onto the street in this country, in this tragic and unnecessary foreclosure crisis. And we need to wake up and realize that our real enemies are not in some distant land. They're not people whose names we don't know and cultures we don't understand. The enemy is people we know very well and people we can identify. The enemy is a system that wages war when it's profitable. The enemy is the CEOs who lay us off from our jobs when it's profitable. It's the insurance companies who deny us health care when it's profitable. It's the banks who take away our homes when it's profitable. Our enemy is not 5,000 miles away. They are right here at home. And if we organize and fight with our sisters and brothers, we can stop this war, we can stop this government, and we can create a better world.
Just to let you know, Pentagon's waiting for Saudi assessments before blaming Iran on refinery attacks. And the news media goes right the fuck along with it. And the news media goes right along with it.
Well, you know, Jimmy, Mike Preisner just articulated it so well.
Right.
That these crimes are being perpetuated against the people right here in our country and other people. Like when he says the poor and struggling class goes to kill the poor and struggling class in other nations, and then he comes home and sees people forced out of their own homes. We can see how all these wars are not for the good of the people. They're only good for the people in power and the military-industrial complex.
And only 10,000 views? That needs more views.
Right?
That needs more views because, I constantly tell my social justice warrior friends who always say, foreign policy isn't that important. I'm like, no. The most racist thing we can do as a country is continue on with our imperialistic ways because we're mostly bombing people of color, indigenous people. And I constantly tell them that, but they just don't seem to get it. And that's why it's kind of disappointing when you see a video like that only have 10,000 views. That should have a million views because that's what it's about, what he just said.
Hey everybody, we're doing a live show every Sunday in October in Hollywood, California at the Sycamore Tavern. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for tickets and become a patron. We give you hours of bonus material every month. Become a premium member. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com and sign up. Thanks for your support.